So as I was reading 2 Corinthians, when I got to chapter 10, it really stuck out for me. So I'm going to talk about the background as to why Paul was telling the Corinthians this, as well as how we can apply it today. So basically, at the time, these kind of like super like apostles, super teachers. Now, I know that like not all these types of churches are ungodly. I'm going to point this out, but it's going to be a lot easier to do a comparison. But when Paul talks about these kind of like these kind of other kind of spectacular kind of apostles, I'm going to refer that to basically like a mega church. And how at the time Paul was very weak, very weak. Paul was very poor. Paul was very poor. Anyway, sorry. Paul was very poor. He was constantly being persecuted and stuff like that. And these kind of super apostles came in, and the Corinthians started to kind of push Paul aside and rather decide to follow them. So I'm going to read from, I said this is 2 Corinthians chapter 10. I'm going to read from verse 7. And it says, "Do you look at things according to the outward appearance? If anyone is convinced in himself that he is Christ, let him again consider this in himself, that just as he is Christ, even so we are Christ. For even if I should boast somewhat more about our authority, which the Lord gives us for edification and not for your destruction, I shall not be ashamed, lest I seem to terrify you by letters. For his letters, they say, are weighty and powerful, but his bodily presence is weak, and his speech contemptible. Let such a person consider this, that what we are in word by letters when we are absent, such we will also be indeed when we are present. For we dare not class ourselves or compare ourselves with those who condemn themselves, but they measuring themselves by themselves and comparing themselves among themselves are not wise. We, however, will not boast beyond measures, but within the limits of the sphere which God appointed us, a sphere which especially includes you. For we are not overextending ourselves, as through our authority did not extend to you, or it was to you that we came with the gospel of Christ, not boasting of things beyond measure, that is, in other men's labours, but having hope that, as your faith is increased, we shall be greatly enlarged by you in our sphere, to preach the gospel in the regions beyond you, and not to boast in other man's sphere of accomplishments. But he who glorifies, let him glory in the Lord, for not he who commends himself is approved, but whom the Lord. So as Paul was saying, these people, these new kind of like super apostles, they kind of were glorifying themselves, with their riches and everything like that. So from their outward appearances, they looked kind of like this official thing compared to Paul. And I'm thinking, what, these guys, and bearing in mind that they were just looking at appearances, but they're like, these guys, they're more put together, they're more kind of, they're more rich. So they must be more important than Paul. They must know more than Paul. And in actual fact, we shouldn't be looking at appearances. And what I do like as well, in in chapter 11, it goes on from verse 14, and it says, "And no wonder, for Satan himself transforms himself into an angel of light. Therefore it is no great thing if his ministers also transform themselves into ministries of righteousness, whose ends will be according to their works." And that chapter and that verse, these 2 verses just remind me that, it says also throughout the Bible not to rely on, on what we see, what we feel, like on spectacles and stuff like that. And because that leads us to kind of be more deceptive, because when we go on to look at, anyone can make themselves look presentable, make themselves look look the part that you expect for whatever particular thing. But actually we should focus on their actions and on their words and what they're preaching, not so much as what they look like, because as it says here, like Satan, disguised himself as, and we found the angel of a light. Like, you know what I mean? So if Satan can do it, anyone can do it. Like, it's just a reminder, it's so important to not look at appearances. Don't rely on appearances. Don't rely on, on the very thing that doesn't matter, but to pay attention to what they're saying, how their actions are the actions of someone who is living a godly life, or is it the actions actually that are actually quite questionable? And instead of boasting ourselves, we should be boasting in God. So we shouldn't be like, oh, I'm so extra, I'm so good at this, that, this is all good. But instead of like boasting on ourselves, actually, who gave us that ability? Who gave us that gift? Who gave us that talent? Oh, it was God. So we should be boasting in God and not in ourselves. I just felt this whole chapter was so much detail, so many different lessons that we can apply today. Also, when it comes to comparing ourselves, we shouldn't be trying to emulate anybody else. Like God chose us for a reason. He chose us for our talents and for our gifts that He gave us. Like He gave us when He molded us, specifically for us. He didn't make us all to be kind of these like kind of sheep where we're all the same. Like each gifts are valuable for each circumstances.